In this episode of the Construction Dorks, we kick off what we hope to be a multi-part series on CTOs and what is actually involved in that job. In this first episode, we just wanted to cue up the idea and talk a little bit about what being a CTO means to each of us and why we think it's an important topic for today's construction companies.
And we're live, episode 96, How to CTO with the Construction Dorks. All right, I like this. We've started to get some purpose here at the Construction Dorks. You never know when that lightning strike's going to happen or the rock's going to fall on our head that makes us have that one little idea, but it's been floating around the circles to talk more about, I'm going to call it leadership in the technology space of construction, that path to the CTO, the difference from the CIO, those kind of things. So it's just going to be the four of us sitting down talking today, wrapping through it. I cannot take credit for a rock falling on my head. It truly hit Trent on the way down. So this was Trent's idea to start the series, and I think we all jumped on board. So Trent, talk a little bit about, maybe start us off. What are you thinking about?
Yeah, this was kind of one of those like late night epiphanies where, you know, we've been doing the Dorks now for a few years, and you know, off and on, and I think we've had a lot of great guests, and we've had you know, a lot of great shows, but you know, as the years have gone by, you know, things get a little stale, I think, and you're trying to think of ways of, you know, how do we keep providing value to our, you know, to our listeners and cohorts out there, and stay relevant. And you know, it kind of hit me that, you know, we've got a great collection of minds, you know, even amongst the four of us, but even in our web of dorks that we have. And it's like there's a service that we can provide. And I think, you know, talking a little bit about that being almost the free source of fractional CTO mentorship for contractors. And you know, we're seeing larger contractors out there bring CTOs on. I mean, you know, our own John Marsh was a CTO at a mechanical contractor for a number of years. You know, Jeff Elwell, the CTO at EM Duggan. We're seeing this role pop up, but there's a lot of, you know, smaller and even less sophisticated contractors out there that are starting to elevate some of their internal tech champions. Maybe not to what they're calling a CTO yet. And maybe some of these companies aren't quite ready for that full-time, you know, CTO hire, that full-time tech leader. So I thought, you know, what a great opportunity to kind of rant a little bit about, you know, what a CTO does, you know, for a trade contractor. What kind of, you know, leadership and organization, you know, can they bring on a tech strategy? Because we're seeing tech adopt more and more with even the smaller contractors. And I think that leadership is becoming more and more important to wrangle all this whole tech stack. And you know, if the contractor can't make the commitment to bringing in a full, you know, C-suite level employee to manage this thing, there are tech leaders that listen to us and amongst our group that could work to elevate themselves to kind of be that person, even if you have the title or not. And I think that this is a great series of podcasts we can do to just talk about, you know, what can you do to your organization to be a CTO figure, even if the title isn't there. And yeah, I don't know. It was like a late night epiphany. It sounds like a fun topic, a fun series. I think we've got some of the, you know, I think we've got some of the best brains to talk about it. I mean, you know, John's in the room right now. He's done this role. I imagine some of our future episodes, as we dive into this more, we're going to bring Jeff Elwell in. I think there's other
Chris
Weaver. Yeah, there's a lot of names out there that are doing this, and I think there's a lot of contractors that either want to do this or should want to do this.
Yeah.
So we can be, you know, look at this as like a free help session to how do we help these contractors, you know, put people in place to develop a tech strategy.
And I think two words that stuck out to me, what you were saying that are kind of key are strategy and leadership. I think that oftentimes when I was the construction technologist early on, it was all about, you know, again, it was early on in the construction tech scope too, but it was, a lot of shiny objects, like let's chase a lot of point solutions. And
How do I make you
as
billable?
right, sure. But then as our stack grows, as the company grows, right, then you really do have to start talking about strategy. Okay, I want to buy this yellow Lego piece, but it doesn't fit with my number 6 red Lego piece. So you start having those conversations of like, okay, we really got to look out over our tech stack and see what do we already have that might come close to accomplishing the task. How do I fit this thing in? And then I did want to tease a little bit on the leadership too, because the MCA and SMACNA technology committees met this month in Baltimore to kind of start having some discussions on how how we want next year's MEP Innovation Conference to be. And in a lot of those discussions, we kind of did ideation sessions, and it was a lot of conversations that we had with the wrap up. You're seeing a lot more people in executive to C-suite level roles coming to that conference. You're starting to see some of the sessions. While our bread and butter is always going to be real talk about tech and tech that people are using to manage and run their businesses, but some of the best reviewed sessions that we had this last time around were all about leadership, about EQ, about how do I build the technology. I mean, so you're starting to see even the technology conference is starting to have those conversations about what are we doing to give a career path to some of these people in these roles. Like, it's not just I'm a BIM jockey that is now a BIM manager, right? There's more to it.
I think you also nailed it with like when we talk about CTO, it's very different than when like a development group talks about it. And even what you were talking about with the leadership, if you go to a conference and they say they're going to give you leadership training, that's a lot of soft skills. You go to the MEP conference, FAB conference, MCA Tech, these are the things where we're teaching you leadership skills specific to technology and managing a huge technology workforce. Because like Trent said, like the number of technologies that require being wrangled has increased dramatically. And I mean, for me, Travis, I was listening to you on podcasts talk about being a construction technologist when that term first came out, and I kind of took on that role. But where I ran into a problem, and when I went to my boss for CTO, was I needed to have the authority to reach into all of these connected platforms that we have in our business. So like, I was sitting in construction tech without the ability to reach out with authority and touch. Hey, listen, I got to get some of your accounting information. I know it's upsetting to you, but I got to get that. I got to get our service information. I got to get our materials and everything else. And, I mean, I think there's the need as a company gets bigger to give that person the title more so that they have that authority that goes with all the responsibilities you're giving them. If you're going to make them responsible for all these things, I think sitting back as the CEO and saying, wait a second, they can't do this unless they speak with the power of the C-suite. And I did my talk on CTOs at MEP with Chris Weaver. And I really think we should have him on because you get like sort of, I'm going to call it like the guerrilla tactics of becoming a CTO with someone that's as small a company as mine, like where it's more based on utility. But with Chris Weaver's, I mean, the jump between what he was doing before he was a CTO and what he was really doing after was pretty significant. He changed from being focused on technology and maybe some process to primarily people, communication. He knew what to get somebody for that technology, to get somebody for that process. But when you ask him, he's out there selling the idea of technology. And that's what we do here, right? Like the Dorks is all about selling technology. And while people don't see it behind the scenes, every once in a while, there's another podcast or two that gets on construction tech. And we're like, that's cool. But we have very little adoption in construction tech. So we'd like you to point out the good things too. Like you can say bad stuff, but we need good stuff too. So I'm really hoping that we can get on some of those CTOs and really encourage people to do this. I think the last thing that I would say is if you're just getting out of college and you have 3 years in the industry, don't try to be the CTO right away. I think that that's going to be depressing for you. I think you should learn the process part and the technology part first, and not be okay. Be the best person in your company by a margin. Like when I look at the CTOs that are best at that, you look at LL and Chris. They already knew the tech. They already knew the process. They were like A plus at that, and then that last piece was, I want the authority to go with what I know and do things. So it's really kind of where I came down. Jeff, you got to see the other side of CTOs, really from the IT, from the CIO side, and you got to look at what's outside of construction and inside of construction. What do you see as specific to the construction CTO that maybe you wouldn't think of if you weren't from the industry?
Yeah, it's a couple things. I agree with you on Chris, and that's and all of this culminated. We were on stage at MEP Innovation talking with Chris Weaver, Matt Lamb, and Joseph Lanzell from Pointer, all about the transformation and changes that the organizations need to go through. I mean, that's the unique piece, is that in the growth of the construction industry, we're still very early. Even though there's so many solutions out there and it feels like it's been forever, we're still pretty early in our journey and our evolution into kind of growing into a really, truly technologically enabled industry. And it comes with not just learning what Chris and Jeff have learned over time and others in the CTO role, and we helped create that construction technologist, Travis, and I wish we had called it an operational technologist, because then there is other industries you can go to and find that exact person and look at that growth trajectory and look at how they become a CTO. Because to link it back, John, like in the construction industry, a CTO's different from a CTO in, say, the software business, versus a CTO, I think, in manufacturing has a very similar structure to a CTO in construction. They just have different stacks, different variables, different needs for that tooling, but they're very similar because you're learning how to operationalize. When you're talking about the software world, they do go through a lot of the similar transformations, right? They're not writing code anymore. If you were a BIM jockey, you're not a BIM jockey anymore. FYI, if you're a CTO and you still do BIM, you're not a CTO. Okay? We'll just cover that for a second. Like, there's structural needs and hierarchies that have to go into it. It's just that since the evolutions in those other businesses are so much further, we have some warring going on, and this is where I'd like to challenge some of the group. And John, it's the beginning of our relationship, right? I've been challenging you since day one about what enterprise architecture from a CIO perspective means, and an IT perspective. And it's time to not only learn those leadership skills and how to communicate to the leadership suite and the C-suite, which Joseph on stage did a fantastic job too of discussing how he had to go through the change of we hold everything in, our data, our knowledge, our information was we held it real close in the leadership world. We didn't share it with our own people, let alone our competition, and slowly had to evolve that mindset. So you have them evolving. You have the operational technologists evolving in what the tools can do and how it can be linked to business goals. And then all of that that stack itself that Trent talks about has to have a foundational base to run, right? You can't get to the internet. You don't have connectivity. You don't have good, plumbing, pun intended, then you're not going to get shit out of it. So this is where I think this has so many things we can unwrap because talking to those people, right, John, we ran into blind spots where people not only ran into the leadership and I don't do BIM anymore. I want to talk to that for a second. I know, Trent, you got the tag. It's still better than BIM, but there's a part of you guys that loves to do it. And
yeah, it's hard to create the separation, I think. And I think so first off, to kind of finish off what you were saying earlier, here in the software world, a CTO to a software company is in nowhere near the same as a CTO to a trade contractor. So we're same in title, but the businesses are like the the position, facilitates and has to understand the business. So in the software world, that role comes from engineering and coding because that's their business. I mean, that is the meat and potatoes of how a software company makes money. So in construction, the CTO is going to be a tech leader, but the foundational knowledge and skills of that individual is going to be construction. I mean, it is the business that you have to support, from a leadership standpoint. And I had a conversation with the president of a mechanical contractor very recently about this. On they're having trouble with tech strategy and adoption and keeping forward, and it is because they don't have the person in a leadership position to push that stuff into the company. They're using a BIM leader to try and do this as a secondary and tertiary task to their job. And I think that is a normal transition for a small mechanic, for any mechanical contractor. I see it that way. I think a lot of the CTOs that we're seeing come out in our trade contractor world are coming from virtual design. I think that's been a pretty natural place for them to come from. But they have to come from it. They can't remain in it. That's the difference. And and they have to have the leadership to drive that tech because.
But I will challenge though they and this is what I think is interesting because you shouldn't be doing BIM, but you still should be dabbling and understanding in it. And
Well,
that's
I was
the
gonna say-
key. That's why the CIO being over it and just kind of like, oh, well, I'm the IT plumbing guy and I'll just take over it. That's why I don't advocate for that. Mm-hmm. If your CIO is going to be the leader at the table, they should have an operational technologist that speaks leadership, that's their left hand or right hand. Vice versa, I think, is required, right? Because that's critical, Trent, because you said it. It's the business. It's what they do. And if you aren't staying up, that should be the thing you go geek out at night is like, what's coming next? What am I not prepared for? What should I be thinking about?
And I was going to say that one of the things that I've seen work really well in these roles, obviously, is you don't have project-based expectations. Now that doesn't mean that you're not going to have a hand in, and this all depends on the size of your company. If you are the size of a mechanical contractor where you're in the CTO role, but you don't have people that are working for you, if there is some new technology that needs to be deployed on a job site or some sort of, I always go back to the 360 cameras or the HoloLens type stuff that I used to do in the past. Like that took very high touch, right? It was still me that was going to go out and do it until that role grew. That doesn't mean, so to your point, Jeff, like you're still involved, you still see it, but you can't have it be a side part of your job when you're actually being required to execute on construction projects. You have your own types of projects, right? And that's something that's completely different as well. And I do like I want to keep this hammered home, this idea of authority to execute on things, because you do need to be able to show up in places and be like, no, this isn't how we're doing it anymore.
I think that was a big missing piece for a lot of people. I think the transition from BIM is more because when you're doing BIM, you're getting to build, like I got to build when I was doing BIM, like 200 buildings. Like very few foremen are going to get on 200 jobs in that sort of range of understanding the planning, because that's what you're building is a big infographic to build a building. Understanding that level of planning that's in the model, I think that's super valuable. Where I struggled, and I did stop working on jobs, but just like last year, because I wanted to stay up on it. And somebody pointed out, they're like, oh, you don't stay up on it by working on jobs. You still use it as a planning tool because you're a virtuoso at it, and it's a really, really profoundly good planning tool and automation tool, to use Revit or to use AutoCAD. Hell, I was using AutoCAD this morning, but it wasn't for a project. It was for planning or as a tool. And I think that's I always go into places and I look at what they're doing in BIM and I'm like, is that the best way? And, I haven't been in there a while, so I just have to trust an expert, and that's tough sometimes. So I can see wanting to hold on to that. I also think that, like I said, we choose the BIM people because they're in, engaged with technology all of their day, and they're engaged with planning for buildings all of their day. So like it's a really easy pick, but I do think they could come from other places. I feel like, you know, you can get a technologist that's not a BIM person, that is a project manager, and they can be a really good CTO. If they're given the opportunity to do so. I think I agree that typically it's coming out of BIM because these are the people that have planned digitally for all those jobs. And man, I think it's a huge plus to get that chance to build 200 buildings virtually. Like we built, you know, everybody who's done BIM builds tons of buildings at a detailed level that's kind of stupid level. You know, we know it from a nut and a bolt all the way up to commissioning and somebody's telling us vague things. It's just really fun and very, very different. I was, you know, Jeff, I want to go back. For those of you who didn't listen, it's always been me and Jeff kind of arguing about CTOs and CIOs and sort of IT getting in the way of construction tech. And, you know, my attitude finally changed. And I think it was this year, after meeting a bunch of developers, to just say that the IT people that I met weren't good at their job. If you're an IT person, and I'm just putting it out there, if you're an IT person that says no to every construction or every other construction tech thing that hits you, you're not a good IT person. In fact, you should always be saying, I could say yes if you do this. Because that's my problem, is they seem kind of hopeless. Like they were like, oh, well, it's a security problem, so I'm not going to help you. That's not your problem as a CTO. That's a bad IT guy that's like behind the times. And maybe
have to deal with that because they might have a CIO or some kind of IT, but they don't have a CTO they don't have somebody to drive it home leadership wise. So you're stuck with a BIM manager trying to push for a technology adoption, and when you hit a wall like that, you don't have the authoritative presence or the the weight behind what you're saying to do what's best for the business at times.
It's
yeah,
funny
but
what even
I
a
agree
title
with
can
you.
do.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
just gonna say,
I'll
it's
agree
funny
with
what a
John
title
though.
do.
Yeah, a title will do that, but I'll agree with John. Like that was my challenge to you, John, and that was the beginning of the relationship. Was like, listen, I just don't think you've actually met truly talented enterprise scale IT architects that know how to say yes and. Yes, and I need to understand security concerns, and we need to understand our tolerances. There are a number of things that can be done to mitigate risk to also achieve goals. And I mean, I got into this business, and I used to say this a lot, and I'm sure it's on the content crew somewhere, so I'm not saying it new, but you can't have an IT person that's your fishing buddy that just came up through it and just is good at a good old-fashioned wireless router. That doesn't cut it, man. Like, these are people who have to get up and live and breathe networking and security. And, I don't even say I'm one anymore because I'm far enough out of it that, it would take me 6 months to get to the position where I would feel comfortable doing it again and being in charge of it and owning those things in a way that makes sense. So that's where... This is what's cool, Trent, is that like you brought up the fractional CTO thing, and that this is where, knowledge and teaching and, supplementing your workforce as a smaller organization that wants to grow to a bigger organization and not have the headaches, right? That was the big learning that when I sat down with Matt Lamb from Rosendin, CIO, Chris Weaver, CTO, Andy J. Egan, and then Joseph Lanzell from Pointer, they all had similar headaches. Like the first call was so annoying because they were just swapping stories of the things that have happened to them and how similar they were. But then I was like, wait, this is a golden thread of like, maybe we don't all have to experience this. And that's why when you said this, Trent, I was like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity because trailblazers blaze trails, but if we can turn around and teach the lessons that we've learned backwards, maybe other people not only don't have to do that, but can eventually get farther than we did. And that's what the industry needs. The industry needs that.
You know what was Jeff? Just to say one more thing before we like jump. What I noticed amongst the companies lately is that everybody that's in that C-suite has a vision for the company, where the company should go. Not somebody else's vision, or not just filling in the blanks, or not just making my vision as a CEO work. They have their own vision for where that company should go technologically, IT, information wise. And I think that's what a lot of the people that are coming up and saying, I want to be the CTO. And I'm like, so what's your vision for the company? And they're like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, if you don't have a vision for the company, I'm not giving you the authority to make decisions for it. Like you're saying you're an expert in IT, excellent. You're an expert in construction tech, excellent. What's your vision for my company? Because if not, you're in operations. All right. And I'll get somebody to be a leader that has a vision of where they want to take our company. I literally talked to somebody that said, I said, why do you want to be CTO? And they said, well, that's the only way I'm going to make the money I want to make. And I'm like, well, that's the wrong answer. like maybe you should be an accountant or pharmaceutical aide or something that pays better. I don't know, but like not that.
Or maybe you should go play the lottery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll follow on that, because this last year at MEP Innovation we had some IT folks up with Darren Young, and this is something that's always struck me about Dustin Adams from Hermanson, is that he'll say to you, I don't care what we do as an organization. If you wake up tomorrow and you want to build widgets, I'm here to support. My vision for the organization is an IT infrastructure that is secure and flexible to fulfill the needs of the business. That's it.
Right.
That's a vision, and that's an absolutely fantastic vision for someone who's leading your IT, because then it allows you to know, well, great, that aligns with, if I wake up tomorrow and the industry has changed and I need to adjust, I can adjust. I can be flexible. So this is where, like, I want to bridge the gap and break the divide between, IT and operational technology, because one doesn't succeed without the other. And that's been cool to see the industry start to grasp, right? But ultimately, here's another, and I think we're just teasing out ideas for later. CTO might be the way you want to make your paycheck, but listen, IT and OT, they're not cheap, and they shouldn't be cheap, right? You get what you pay for. Mm-hmm. There's a reason you don't go into Best Buy and buy enterprise grade, products. Same thing, right? You don't go to, maybe you go to Home Depot a few too many times more than you should, but are you really going to Home Depot to get your fabs, your fab tools?
It's a demanding position. So, results will be expected, and what you do will be very out in the open. It'll be very obvious if things are going well or things aren't going well. And you're going to have to have extreme ownership of how well anything operational tech-wise is going. But the reason it's probably a fairly well compensated position too is, just if you look at the skill set it takes to be successful in that role, you're going to have a very profound knowledge of how the business operates, and that's in every department of the business, from pre-construction, estimating, from sales, marketing to pre-construction, estimating, all the way through design, realization, and fabrication, and construction, closeout. Your tech strategies will eventually touch every piece of the company. So the breadth of the knowledge of this individual is expansive. So it's going to be an experienced, heavy hitting individual.
Well, I was going to say, you're touching on, like, from the business aspect, but this person also, we've already mentioned leadership abilities. You have to be able
leadership. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have to be able to understand process and process mapping. You have to be able to understand budgeting. And you hit on the sales and marketing, but we've talked about this at the convention or the conference a lot too, is like selling tech internally. Well, now as a CTO, you have to sell yourself. You have to sell an entire tech stack. You have to sell tech adoption from you're now at the top down. You're not doing the grassroots where maybe you came from. I don't know if I said budgeting, but the budgeting is another big one too, where you have to do that. And out of that budgeting is, to your point, Trent, like, people are watching that. We always talk about fuzzy ROI, but you need to have You need to have an answer for that question when it comes to it. If I'm going to buy Stratus, what's it going to pay back to me? When am I going to earn my money back? Because every CEO wants to know that, or president, or board, or whoever you're working for.
You're not getting your money
You
back.
become more
You're not
I'm
getting
going
your
to
money
fight with you about that. You're not getting your money back.
Yeah.
It's not about that, right?
Well,
That's
that's where a good CTO in construction, I would say, is you learn to have that conversation.
yeah. Well, you say we're not getting it back, but this is what we're doing beyond
Right.
what we were capable of before. I really challenge the ROI. I hate it. I absolutely
I hate the ROI
hate it.
too. But you get it
especially
all the time.
Well,
I know,
you
but
can-
it's attaching it to a business outcome, right? That's where I want smarter leaders that can turn that question around to this is how we get a better business outcome, and
That's
it's how it
you're
has
not-
to be
but you're not
approached.
gonna
I
get
think.
an open checkbook, so I mean, you're going to be beholden to.
Well, and the job costing mentality of construction hinders that too, because you're always seen as going to overhead. So now you have to have that conversation to be like, yeah, I'm adding 2% to overhead, but these processes will make us 10% better on every job we do. And you have to have the analysis to be able to, or at least bullshit your way through it.
Well,
That's why to try to get people to do that technology as people and viewing each technology purchase as a position, because you don't hire somebody and say, what's the ROI on Mike? That doesn't happen. Okay. Like we hire it because we have a lot of jobs for Mike and we know we're doing them in an expensive manner right now. So we're going to get Mike to do them because we're going to save money on doing the jobs we already do. Technology fits that better. It's more like hiring a person in to do something. And when I was at Spader, that's a lot of the leverage that I used was basically that mentality of I'm not buying a piece of software, I'm hiring something in to do a bunch of jobs that we either don't want to do or can't do right now. And also, Travis, you are so right. If you don't write down how much money you are making for your company, and I don't care what the calculation is right now, but like you're not making any money. So like at least act like you're making money. Like write it down. This is how much I think it is, because it's hilarious how many people I know that are heads of BIM managers who are saving their company millions of dollars a year, but the company has no idea because they don't write anything down. And they never think at raise time to present all this money they saved.
well,
It is crazy.
that's part of the training. That's part of the teaching of, hey,
Yeah,
this is how
yeah,
you
that-
quantify the impact. And, you know, and this is another one where the operational technology folks, I think, get a little out over their skis, so to speak, is that you hit it, Travis. The business is a lot more than just building. And we do think project to project, and that's not how business runs. And Trent, you said it. It's all the way from, you know, business development, the farthest tip of the spear, all the way through. Look, how many of you in operational technology think about legal and think about warranty and think about our legal obligations to protect ourselves as an organization, but also to, you know, continue to have those things as we need? Like, there is a depth of understanding that you have to get out of that BIM room. And yeah, it's very powerful to understand how the business is done, but then you've got to get uncomfortable and you need to learn inventory management. You need to learn about estimating and bidding. And I mean, God, a CRM is part of this and has a thread all the way through to the end. You know, this is the complicated nature that I don't think, especially fast growing, right? You're fast growing electrical and you're thinking go, go, go. And you're like, oh, wait, I need to learn all those things. They make a difference. Yeah, they do. And it takes somebody stopping, you know, pressing the pause button for a second once in a while and just saying, hey, are we truly thinking about our entire business? And then, you know, Travis, to your point, I could be, ROIs on a short term are really important to be able to communicate in certain ways. But really it should be about, and this is what I suck at, I'll be honest, like everywhere I go, I need this help, is like, I need somebody who can analyze the numbers at a higher level and can help understand throughput and, you know, not just net profit, not just, you know, net revenue, but profit and where it's being spent and how it's being spent, and understanding where those technologies are impacting that ability to get throughput and quantify it. Right? That's hard. It's not easy. It's not a skill set everybody has.
It is hard, and some of the tools that you're trying to sell internally are the tools that are going to help you do that, right? Because I think we've all kind of pointed out in the last 10 years, we do have a lot of data. We don't necessarily know what it is or if it's any good. And then we also, we also have areas of our businesses we're already not quantifying in some of these tools that are coming on in the analytics dashboards and everything else that go along with it are supposed to help us do that. But it's probably a hard sell to go to your boss and say, I want to install the software that's going to 2 years from now tell me how I'm doing my job. How am I doing? Am I doing all right? I don't know. I'll find out in 2 years. I need some data first.
Yeah, long sales are tough, man. They're just really tough, and so many of the things that we need are not short-term fixes. We have all the short-term fixes. We're really good at short-term fixes. What we need is some long thinking and some investment in stuff that's probably not going to turn out for a year or two. And you do see that with the bigger firms. How long did Doug take to bring online Stratus? Again, it was like more than 12 months. I think Elwell's in a similar boat. You look at some of the top controllers of technology, and they're able to convince their executive, and giving them the credit, they're able to convince their executives to allow them to help develop this for the company, to really train up those sort of tech workers specifically for there. I think that's a big part of it. I think we definitely though need to talk about that idea of whether your communication is sort of introverted or extroverted, because one of the bigger problems that I hear when I'm there is they're like, oh, we have a guy that would be great for that, but they're a horrible introvert. And it's like, well, they can be professional and communicate, but they need to be trained for that. I don't know many tech people that wouldn't describe themselves as an introvert when they were young. So either I don't believe everybody, or a lot of people have moved from being an introvert to at least being professional enough to do an extrovert's job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're gonna have to, you are going to have to measure and prove your changes too, because the business is not going to be set up to do that. That in contracting, the business is going to, well, if you're lucky, your business is set up to measure and track revenue in your revenue generating stream. But I've seen some that don't, so it's good. But it's definitely not going to be set up and ready to track the changes in the projects that you're taking on. So, and you're gonna, from that leadership perspective, you're gonna have to work with someone like your CFO or someone in finance and revenue to make these changes like a project, and you're gonna have to prove the results of these changes, of these things, and with that's going to be the control to isolate changes too. A lot of times you'll see it's like, we got to change this, the old, it's like you're going to go out to a job site and make 13 changes, and then when things go right, you're like, well, one of those worked. I don't know, but so the strategy you're going to have too is it's like, hey, I've got a project this quarter. Set like an OKR for the quarter as a tech leader, that we're going to drive this change in our tech organization, through something on the operational side, and you're going to isolate that change, and you are going to have to measure and prove the result of what you're changing and what you're doing. So it's but through that, you're proving the value of the initiatives you're taking on, and you're also learning what works, what doesn't work. It's definitely, it takes it's going to take a strong leader. It's going to take someone who's organized. Once again, we go to the breadth of this position, like organized leader, understands the business, tech savvy, like all these.
That's all change management, right? You got to have a change management philosophy. You got to have an understanding of what the organization can handle, right? People can handle a lot more than an entire organization. So understanding your size and your availability for that change. But also then, and I hear this a lot, is, in construction, we think we're really good at project management because we manage projects. That does not mean you know how to manage a technology project, because
Right.
they are very different. And one, you hand a building over, and unless you're a service contractor, you leave it, right? It's done. You kind of go, even as a service contractor, sometimes we go, we hand it to the service team and we're out, right? And it's their problem now. That never happens in technology, right? It's a completely different skill set. It's a completely changing and continuing process that has to do with a stack. And we really do. We think we're good at this. Nah, not really. It sounds the same, but they're very different.
That's a whole rabbit hole we could dive down in this.
Yeah.
In this is because you're right. You're total on there. Like it is managing a different project, right? And then you have different considerations. You have the Duggins of the world that have entire development staffs and teams. So now you're managing an internal project, right? That's different than managing an outsourced project. And then you go out and you buy a piece of software. Well, that implementation is a project, and you're working with, so I mean that's a month worth of podcasts right there, just diving into each type of project that you might have to take on.
Well, and you're running teams. I mean, you are running multiple teams, right? You're actually running multiple, like, business departments. To be fair, so.
I think project management is also different in the fab shop because, like, I go out and I think the first thing that I said to people on fab shops when they said, what are we going to do wrong? And I said, we're going to try to waterfall this like you waterfalled every building that you've ever built, because you can't do an iterative building real well. Like, they're not real happy when you give an MVP on a building. But, like, everywhere else, that's a good idea. Like, we are in the one realm
I can't help
where
but picture
where,
that. Just
where
don't go through that door. Everything is great. It looks nice here. Just go through that door.
But really, like, I get with a contractor and they want to build their own software, and like the first thing is like, do you understand what this whole iterative design agile thing is? I said, it's not just a word. We actually we aren't going to go from freaking the 1 yard line to a touchdown. We're going to have to do all the downs in between, and we're going to go backwards and we're going to go forwards. And if you think you can do that beautiful pass, that's wonderful, but that's simply something that only construction people think is possible. I really do think, like, it's one of our biggest blind sides, and whether or not you believe it, you've been living in that. So, like, it sunk in. I've been picked on by my developers because it's still there in my mind. Everything's still very waterfall in nature, and, like, you should know the end before you get started with the first step. And they're like, this is never going to work, man. We just need to know what general direction you are and how big of steps you want us to make.
How many times do you ask them if they're done yet? You're done, right?
Yeah.
You're done. Are you done? Yeah, no.
It's like being done with BIM.
Yeah.
They're like, are you done with the BIM yet? It's like, is the job done? Is facilities management done? Like, is commissioning done? No, then I'm not done.
Then we're not done. No, it's a huge ball of yarn to undo, and it's also, you have to then leave that tool in somebody else's hands, right? That they must manage. And I would say, John, too, the other thing I don't think we do well enough, and it goes to our gap in our labor issues in our industry, is we don't go outside of our industry and get other people to come in that have a relatively good knowledge of something we're about to do. Fabrication shops look a lot like manufacturing facilities. Take one through it that knows lean and knows, how Six Sigma and how to do those things. They look at the world differently. We just need then somebody from the field to say, yeah, but this is how it goes in. Help us figure this out together. And that's one of the big things I've seen over time is we think we can home grow it all. We can, in some respects, it can happen, but man, is it painful. So maybe we could get a little more efficient.
That's an expensive way to go, man.
It is.
Yeah.
There's got to be an analogy somewhere there. But I think we've teased a ton, guys. I mean, I think if you're listening out there in listener land, as we call it, and this hit a note, drop us a note. Let us know what episodes we should dive into. I think we want to unpack a lot of these and discuss at length what's possible. And, we love hearing the four of our voices, but I think we could go get some really intelligent and weathered or experienced, however you want to call it, folks that have the bumps and bruises to tell you, because you don't want to hear it just from us. You should hear it from the people who are actually doing it.
Couldn't agree more. I'm excited. Absolutely. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think this.
Well, listen, we're going to be dropping this. Travis, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think this is a great path we're on, and I would definitely love to hear some feedback on which direction people think it might go next.
So if you see us online, drop us a note. If you see us in person, grab us and, tell us what is working, what's not working, what you might want to hear. And hey, if you're one of them, come on out and join us. If you're on the path, come out and join us. We'd love to have you on the show. So You'll see these dripped in throughout our regular episodes, and stay tuned for more in the future. With that, thanks for tuning in. This has been episode 96, How to CTO.